Is this the awkward part before our stinger?
This is
Okay.
the pre-stinger stinger. Is
Okay.
the internet there? I believe it is. You can, just looking at the pre-chat, you can definitely see some new faces in the chat room tonight.
It's like it's like two groups of friends just all of a sudden getting thrown into a room. I like it.
Yeah, we definitely have some restream pixelation things happening here.
The Sage says video is not coming through.
I see that. I mean, it is, but it's not super.
Oh, whoa. I'm looking at this now. Whoa, that is bonkers.
I wonder why that is, because that's coming from Restream.
Oh man, somebody blowing the cartridge and
right?
Whoa, this has never happened before.
No.
This is what happens when you have guests, by the way.
Okay, here we go. Look, I just fixed you.
Yeah. Ah, wow. The Matrix.
Okay, let's see if I magically return. Oh.
All right.
So we got the bugs worked out. Perfect.
Game
timing.
on. Game on.
All right. Well, we're super excited. We're gonna get ready to roll the open here and get this show started. Welcome everybody who's here in chat. A bunch of new folks, new faces, and names. Be sure to be leaving your messages. We'll get to all that here shortly. So let's get this thing officially started. What do you say? Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. This is a podcast that is all about flying in midlife, learning to fly in midlife, and just pursuing aviation at a later stage in life. My name is Chris Moran, known as the Midlife Pilot on YouTube. My co-host Brian Siskind is alongside from the famed Music Row of Nashville. And this is episode number 19, and we're super glad you're here for this one. We're very excited to have a couple of great guests with us tonight. RH and AG, the co-hosts of the world famous Opposing Bases podcast, and they'll be joining us here in just a minute. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing great, man. I'm super excited about this one, and I'm excited to see, especially the like we were talking about, kind of the when you have one group of friends meet another group of friends, and then you kind of see like how that works. So I'm excited to see what goes on in the chat tonight. So just a reminder to everyone to be generous with the questions, and we're going to make sure to get a lot of them through. You're not going to hear a lot of us talking tonight if all goes as planned. But I'm super excited.
Yep, we're very glad that you're here. Housekeeping items, just as a reminder, thank you so much to everyone who's been helping out with this as we've kind of got this thing off the ground. We're almost to episode 20, if you can believe that. Thank you to all of you who have taken the time to subscribe. If you haven't done that, please do. It does make a huge difference. We're finding it wherever you get your podcasts. And also we've seen some great reviews on Apple. We were talking about some of those earlier too, before we went on the air about, well, who does what around here. Maybe slightly misguided, but they certainly help as well. So we really appreciate that. It helps other people like you find the podcast that might have it be a meaningful content for them as well. Let's quit wasting time. What do you say?
Yeah, man. I mean, we could talk about, hey, I went flying the other day, but who cares? We got Opposing Bases. Let's do this.
Exactly. Let's welcome in RH and AG, the co-hosts of Opposing Bases, joining us tonight. Super glad you're here. And before we even get started, I have been waiting 4 years to say this. What's up, AG?
Hello, everyone.
Sorry, H. I stole your line, but I've been waiting a long time to get
No,
that.
you executed it very well. Thank you for having us on the show.
Yeah, well, we're super glad to have you. So, in the off chance that there's anyone in here that's hanging out on the podcast tonight that doesn't know about opposing bases, what's the backstory? Tell us a little bit about like how it got started. What's the show about? What's the story there?
AG, you want to get that?
Sure. So I think RH and I were sitting in the Tracon one night on a late shift, and a lot of these questions came up, and questions all the time. It was questions we had from controllers and from pilots, and we thought, man, why don't we just put out like, just record like 10 little things, and it's like, these are our topics, and we'll just put the information out there. It'll be out there. We'll blast it out to the world and answer these, questions that we get. So we kind of started doing that. And in the first couple episodes, we decided what the topics were. But then as soon as people started listening and then they are asking questions, it's just self-sustaining. It doesn't end. We don't keep up with it. We're always usually like a month and a half behind or so on on trying to catch up with this stuff.
Yeah, so I'll add to that if I can. We're both pilots, and we both started about the same time as air traffic controllers. We both have, different backgrounds in flying, and we were getting the daily questions, the hourly questions at work on, hey, why'd they do that? Why'd they say that? What does that mean? Show me what this approach plate means. Because air traffic controllers, we get some basic pilot training on that side, but it's very basic, and we were a good resource for them. So we thought we had something to offer. And like you said, the inbox has blown up over the years, and the format of the show has evolved to mostly feedback, and some of the feedbacks drive the topic of the show. Really, all that means is we spend a little bit more time on one of the questions. So it's a lot of fun. We're having a blast. 238 episodes in the can.
Wow, that's fantastic. So you guys were you both pilots? You're both pilots before controllers?
Yep.
AG was in the military. Well, just left actually. I was in helicopters at the time, and I had left the airlines in the CRJ at a regional carrier when I started air traffic. So yeah, we were both pilots before we started.
So do you find that being a pilot that is a controller versus controllers that are not pilots, do you find yourself, I don't know, able to quickly identify when you're flying somewhere else? Can you just hear, can you sense like this is a pilot controller versus a non-pilot controller?
Ooh, that is a good question. I've never asked that question before.
Stick around, it gets weirder.
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. I'm gonna have to, when we do this trip coming up, I'm gonna have to try to pay attention to that and see. But no, I think it would be rare to catch a little hint. Every once in a while, you might catch a little hint where you're like, oh, that's a little inside knowledge, like that's kind of thing.
Yeah, like I just wonder if you don't want to be like, sorry, actually, can I, Senator, can I please actually get a pilot / controller, please?
Yeah.
No, that won't go over well.
That's very cool. Very cool. Do you find, so sticking with the kind of the overarching theme of this specific show and this channel, so I think one of the struggles, and I've seen it a lot, just from pilot friends that I know and people in the club that I run who are learning to fly, there's something magic about the radio side of things and ATC. I think magic, and also deathly fear inducing to a lot of people. Like, I don't know what happens. I don't know why. I mean, I guess I kind of do. I had a little bit of an advantage that before I started training, I had many hours of simulation and was using Pilot Edge a lot before I even started training. And I found, for me, that was a gigantic jump start when radio was second nature to me when I started training in the plane. But I just see a lot, and especially in folks kind of in our 40s and 50s who are starting to fly, it just feels I don't know. There's something very intimidating, I think, about keying up and knowing that there's all these other people hearing you and talking to you. Do you find that to be the case? Like, is it age specific? I don't know if it's an age specific thing. What do you think it is that is such a people are so scared of you? You don't look scary, but it is intimidating.
Well, you bring up a good point. They can't see us,
Mm,
and stories get passed through your training, and you hear mostly negative stories. A lot of people are prone to tell the negative story. So, oh, this one time I got yelled at, or this happened to me, and So I think from day one in flight training, I trained 17 and 18-year-olds in college. When I first became a flight instructor, they were starting their pilot training as freshmen in college, and they were just as intimidated as a midlife pilot. They were no different. As soon as you key up, everybody can hear you thinking, and all those stories they heard about the nasty air traffic or all the bad things that could happen if you say something wrong, which is just mythical. That's not really true. There's parts of the NAS where you encounter that, but it's certainly not every day.
sure.
And I think that kind of feeds into the nervousness. And until you get time on frequency and keep doing it and getting more comfortable with hearing yourself talk and broadcasting your thoughts, it is difficult.
Yeah.
Well, I've always said it's, people that are our age have already probably or hopefully in their life already achieved some level of expertise in something else for a sustained period of time with career or whatever. And so it's been a long time since we've even put ourselves willingly into a position where we're an idiot for everyone to know. We've become masters of some craft over time. So I think that that's part of it, but I can totally see that it doesn't matter what age you are. Nobody, everybody has an ego or just doesn't want to be. It's like you want to be invisible. As I think as a student pilot, like it's like, how can I just be almost translucent? Like I'm not here. Don't mind me. Is there a separate channel for this, or
Chris, you brought up a good point. I mean, your background, if you did that time on a simulator program where you can hear other people speaking the language, that goes a long way. I mean, you take someone on a discovery flight and they've never heard any of the lingo, they're going to be completely further behind the curve than someone who's even a few hours, 5-10 hours of listening to the language will go a long way when you
For
start
sure.
flying.
I'm at about 200 hours total time now, and I've used flight following. I won't go to the practice area without it around here, just because I'm exceptionally paranoid about other traffic just in general. And I had one of my coolest experiences this last trip. I flew to Newport News and back last week, and I love. It's always something unique and different. But we got tasked from Potomac Approach with. There was an airplane that they couldn't get a hold of, and things are a little different around Potomac sectors when they can't get a hold of somebody. Now they weren't in the ring, but I don't know where they were. I was looking for them on ForeFlight. I couldn't find them, but a controller asked us to see if we could get a hold of this other airplane, relay for him. And that was like my first experience with that. But what I'm just finding, I guess the point of that whole narrative was that every controller I talked to, almost to a person, has been. I mean, I haven't run into any. I've not been yelled at, not been scared, not been. In some of the language, like there is phraseology, and that stuff is important, especially in busy sectors and like keeping things. I have a lot more real, like just talking to people these days. Like that was a pretty non-standard request, and so we were just communicating like human beings, for a while, trying to figure that out. So it's I think the more that you get into, the more, just like you say, the more time you get on the mic and talking to people, the kind of the easier that gets.
Being on the other side of it, I think so much of the time where you get yelled at as a pilot, seeing it from the controller side, it's just a grumpy controller. You're not really doing anything wrong. If it was a different controller, that same scenario, it never would have gone that way. You wouldn't have got yelled at. It's just somebody that's kind of grumpy, and sometimes people are grumpy. We have certain controllers that are a little more. They tend more to the grumpy side of things, but I think if you kept that in mind, like this guy's he's a little bit grumpy today. He's a little off today. It's not as big of a deal as we made it out to be. as I made it out to be starting out flying, I think I was more nervous to be a controller and talk on the frequency than a pilot and talk on the frequency.
Yep. I don't know if you remember. I remember my first transmission in the radar room, not in the tower, and I was very, very nervous. It was like being in the airplane for the first time. What do I say? And I've heard it 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times by then, and it's scary to push the button. No one else can talk, and they're all listening.
Yeah. Elliot Cox is in the chat room and said he got his private at 41, and the radio was definitely the toughest part of his training. I could get that. And Michael Young wants to know, he's curious if ATC notices more struggles on comms from new PPL pilots or new IFR pilots. Like, who struggles more, the new private or the new instrument guy? Maybe different struggles. I mean,
yeah, it's different struggles. So the day-to-day stuff, your IFR students are going to be fine. They've kind of been through it. But then when you start getting into real instrument specific, the PTAC stuff, the approach clearance, and now we're trying to fly the plane. We're turning the plane. We're talking. We're changing. We're doing approach stuff. We're down in the FMS, whatever it is. And so there's definitely a lag. Like, they'll be fine, and then at that point, you hit a big lag, and it's like buffering.
Yeah, I would imagine too. I would imagine for when you guys either if they openly declare that they're a student pilot, or you can just kind of tell that they're a student pilot. I would imagine that just like some sort of empathy switch turns on, especially if you've already been through it yourself. This unique, where again with this kind of pilot controller versus just a controller. If you've been actually through it yourself, I would imagine you probably are much more attenuated to student pilots and kind of treating them how you wish or hoped that people would have treated you when you were that sort of nervous.
I think my behavior on the radio, in that sense of hearing somebody that was unsure or a little bit slower to say the things they wanted to say, I think since starting the show and hearing feedback, and I've since started flying again since we started the show, it's made a huge difference in my empathy level for a student or confused pilot or just behind a little bit. And I do exercise more patience. I am empathetic for that. And being a pilot, I think, matters in that context. And when you walk into a room and you hear a controller kind of getting angry at somebody, it's like, come on, let's back up for a second. Is this really the end of the world? Because getting upset usually slows you down as a controller as well. And it doesn't end well for anybody. Just take a deep breath and move on.
I was always bad about declaring the fact that I was a student. I would only do it if I felt I needed it, or it was a get out of trouble card. Like, I didn't want to be the guy who was like a student pilot on radio, but like if I thought, I'm not where I'm supposed to be right now, I'd be like, I'm a student pilot.
Student pilot on short final, am I clear to land?
Yeah. You shouldn't be embarrassed about mentioning it. Certainly stop doing that once you're rated, but I don't think people should be embarrassed in admitting that.
That's a good point. I never thought about that. I should pull that out.
You could do it now.
I never thought about that.
I mean, hey, it's a license to learn. Hey, that's what they say, right? So
yeah, all of your IFR flight plans, the remarks section, student pilot. Wait, what?
Right. Like I've been at this guy's home airport for 10 years.
The longest training.
Bearded Aviator wants to know, aside from the work pleasure part for you guys, since one's a job and one's not, which side of the radio do you prefer to be on?
That for me is a loaded question, because right now for me to be on the pilot side of the radio, it requires me to be me. So I think I would enjoy it more if that wasn't the case. But I do, like, especially lately, and we've been training a lot, and it's been enjoyable at work. We've had fun. We're having a good time at work. And so I think right now, if I had to pick one or the other, I would say air traffic. I'm having more fun doing that.
Yeah,
the Army the Army really can ruin flying.
I like being on the air traffic side as much as the pilot. I'd put them in the same plane, but when it comes to actually speaking on the radio, the controller side is far more fun because you're talking to 10, 15 airplanes sometimes versus just answering your calls. It's kind of boring when you're the pilot on the air traffic. If you're only looking at the air traffic portion of it from the pilot side, it's like, this is kind of boring.
Right. That's fair. The Journey of a Second Generation Pilot, that's a YouTube name, said he's a Patreon supporter of Opposing Bases. Glad to find this show, and we're certainly glad that you're
I
here.
think that they also mentioned that they were about to do their check ride somewhere in the thread there.
Yes,
yeah,
it's coming up. Good luck.
Yeah, next Wednesday. Yeah, good luck. That's fantastic.
Nothing to worry about. It's just everything on the line and everything you've been working for.
Here's a
pressure.
mutual friend of ours who actually made the connection here for this show tonight to happen. Ben Singer said, "Here's a question that Opposing Bases have gotten before, but to help the newer pilots here, this I'm sure you get this. How many times can you talk about this? I'm sure when requesting flight following. Okay, before you answer it, I'll throw what I do, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. When requesting flight following, what order do you want the information? To cold call or not to cold call is always the first question I get, and I always do, just because it takes literally 3 seconds for me to get my tail number out there and for them to respond. If they want to respond, if you want to respond to me, if you're not too busy, it gives you a chance.
For those
to
who are
ignore
unfamiliar, cold calls, I'm raising my hand with who I am and not saying anything else.
Yeah, just like a tail number.
Yeah.
We can go down a wormhole on that one, on that cold call. I think most recently when we talked about it, there's sort of two answers. It depends on who you're calling. If you're calling a center or a TRACON for flight following, I think the cold call, you'd find that most controllers would say they like the cold call. Delta tower controllers that are expecting an arrival to say what they're doing and what type of airplane they are, I don't know that that's as necessary or as expected. They're waiting for all of it. That's what they're waiting for.
That's very fair. Well, then you can handle the rest. What's the preferred order? What makes it easy for you in your system?
The keyboard that we type into is an ABC keyboard, and it's, I don't know, maybe 8 inches of keys on one side that we can type letters. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So when you start talking, we can, with the help of ADSB, we can actually hit a button and see who's starting to talk to us. That helps a ton. If I only caught the last 3, I can find that airplane. I start with the call sign, and then we have to hit the space bar. The next thing we type in is your present position or somewhere near an airport, a 3-letter identifier of somewhere that you are near, a VOR or an airport. And then we hit the splat button. That's the destination. Space again. Now we're going to the third line that we're typing here that we can't just go move a cursor. We're moving it with spaces.
You're committed. Yeah.
We're committed.
Once you go, you're committed to what you've typed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've done call sign, 3 letters of where you are, splat, which is just a little star on our screen, just like the character on your 8 key on your keyboard. The destination, the aircraft type, space, and then the 3 numbered altitude. So the perfect call, there's no wrong way to do it. So don't feel like it has to be perfect. It helps us though in our tiny brains. If you said after your cold call, we've already typed in your call sign, hey, November 123 over Liberty, flight following to Lynchburg, Skyhawk, 5,500 feet. Unkey.
Man, I would hand out an award on frequency for that. Yeah. I would hand out an award. Perfect.
Do you like airplane type that far at the end? I always heard it was up front.
Well, it's in the order of lines, it's the third line of the data that we're typing in out of 4 lines. So you could say it with your call sign and we might remember it. I have a hard time with that.
Okay.
But if you say it in the order I said, I'm literally typing it as you say it, and I don't have to process and think back to, wait, did he say it was a Bonanza or a Skyhawk? So my most common response for somebody after I've typed in the call sign, I got the destination in their present position. Even if they said Cherokee 123, I always go back because I can't remember. It was 3 seconds ago, right? That's way too far away. Yeah. I say, hey, say aircraft type again. And everybody that's listening is like, what a dummy. He literally started with that. Yeah, but I forgot about it because I typed your call sign and all the other things. I'm on the next
brain
slide.
Power to this other thing. Yeah.
What about equipment, the sort of slant golf and all that?
I'll let AG answer that one.
for flight following, it defaults to slant uniform. We don't put the type in or the equipment suffix. It just defaults to slant uniform. And for the purposes of what that flight following, I don't want to say flight plan, but for that strip now that's in the system, it doesn't care. Really, it doesn't care. I could put slant nothing. I mean, no transponder, nothing, and it wouldn't really care. It's just, it is purely for automation purposes, in the background. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So that's useless information to proffer getting flight following.
Yes.
Yeah, in
All
terms
right.
of that initial call, yeah. I mean, if later on down the road someone asks, "Hey, can you go direct to a fix? I need to take you around some weather or something. Are you slant?" They're going to say slant uniform, which you wouldn't probably be able to do it. Nope, I'm slant golf. Okay, and they may make the change, but it's not necessary for us to automate and hand you off to the next sector.
Cool. That's very good stuff.
I'm always looking for anything I can trim down just a little bit more. So I've got another thing. That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get through some of these. So One Dog Geek says, what is the most easily avoided thing that pilots do that annoys air traffic control?
Man.
Flying.
I have one that's like first thing I thought of. I get
Okay.
I don't like it when it takes more than a couple seconds to get a response. For some reason, it was
Yes.
happening a lot
Yes.
the other day.
Perfect.
So this
Yes.
sounds really cold to say it like this, and I don't mean to be condescending to pilots, but when you're in any TRACON environment or center environment, I know there's music, and I know you want to talk to your passengers, and flying's fun. You could be doing other things. You're not just listening to air traffic. But when you fly with someone who's experienced, the conversations kind of pause when the controller starts talking. And they're expecting their call sign to be said. And as soon as they hear that it's not their call sign, conversation continues. That probably didn't take long in your training before that started to happen. The newer ones or the guys that aren't paying attention, I would love a response now, not in 3 more seconds.
Right.
I need it now.
Yeah. We had one today, and I was training the guy, and I had to go so far as to explain, like, hey, you need to prioritize when you're going to talk to this guy, because it is taking up so much time on the air that you need to plan out. Okay, I've got this other thing to do that's time sensitive. I cannot talk to this person before I do that. Or there's just this dead air. There's 5 seconds of waiting. Now that guy's gone through final. And so it is a thing. That is definitely a thing. That was probably what I would say too.
I could hear it in his voice when that Potomac approach controller that I got handed off to, when I ended up on his frequency, the very first thing I heard was him calling this other, I'm not going to say, this other airplane out, and said, when I keyed over, the first thing I heard was the last part of his tail number, and he goes, for the 5th time, he's already, like, now he's saying how many times he's called, and then there's all this silence, and then we're to the, like, if you hear this transmission ident, and I thought, I'm reading the room, I'm thinking, I'm not even checking in with this guy yet. I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to let him talk to at least one other plane before I
It's like
say
when the
hello.
teacher's
I'm like,
mad.
nah, I'm going to let you have somebody else first, because that does not sound fun.
Actually, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, like, on the flip side, I've had recently the experience where the controller at Nashville, I was crossing their approach path, and there's all kinds of stuff going on, and I just told him where I was going and wanted flight following, and he just started talking to me. I mean, he was rapid fire busy, and then all of a sudden I told him where I was going, and he was like, "Oh, are you going over there for the cheap gas?" He started, well, if you don't know, I mean, that's where it is. Like he started. It was like in a flash, I was just hanging out at the FBO with the controller or something. It was, and both me and my wife were kind of like, just like, I don't want to. I wanted to do nothing to perpetuate that conversation at all. I didn't want all the other, United guys and Southwest guys to just be like, oh my God, this Skyhawk is now, on a 5-minute tirade about gas with the controller. But he started it. Do you guys ever do that? Do you get just like conversational and just kind of relax with it?
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while, when the time allows it, sure. Yeah, we're humans. We're pilots. We're friends. We're normal people.
Okay, you say you're human,
You
but
know,
like pull under your chin and lift, and let's see.
So we're pretty lucky. So everybody who has watched my whole saga of learning to fly. So I'm in West Virginia, and so I'm at a little non-towered airport in Fairmont, and just 7 miles south is Clarksburg. So they're a delta with a tower and an approach and the whole thing. Just north central West Virginia, and so it's a super close knit group. Like some of the we know a lot of the controllers there, and everybody knows each other, and so they know the story of our flying clubs and when things happen. And so we have a great recording from the other day. One of our he may be in this chat. One of our guys, we got a brand new 150 in our club. Well, brand new to us. This is our third airplane in the flying club, and it had been here less than a week. And the guy took it out and was in Clarksburg doing stuff. And anyway, long story short, there may have been something outside the plane that was hitting the side of the plane and may have done some paint damage, and everybody knew about it. So the next time that plane went down there and that pilot was flying around, Tower was calling him out pretty good about it to make sure these things were all inside the plane. So we got this huge recording of them getting ribbed, but it is cool to, like, to have that kind of, it takes the edge off a little bit, especially for some of the new guys who are learning to fly, to see like these are just people like messing with you like everybody else, and it's all good.
I wish we could do it more, where it wasn't so kind of faux pas. Because even there's on the controller side, there's controllers that are like, oh, you can't, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be having those conversations like that. I don't know. I'm pretty easygoing on frequency. I will definitely have a conversation if there's time to do it.
Right.
It does not
Right.
bother me at all.
Mark Teresi in the chat said that he found that watching YouTube videos was a huge help with comms for me. And I YouTube was a huge part of that's been a huge part of my whole aviation journey too. I think that's certainly like a generational thing. It's not just aviation. We've talked, Brian and I have talked about this a lot. Like, if there's anything in the world that you're interested in, even as niche as it is, there's more content than you can ever watch about that topic. But I definitely think
And so we decided to make more.
Yeah.
We have conjoined content that we make and separate content we make in the sea of content. So
that's great. The more people can see and the more people can share. I mean, sometimes you see some stuff that probably shouldn't be on the internet.
For sure.
But if you can weed through that and try to find the things that are valuable and you're learning from.
Well, I had one situation where it kind of went sideways on me a little bit, where I had right after I got my private, I was just going to my local airport here in Nashville to do some pattern work. And I had, and it's a new tower. They don't have radar, and just a lot was still getting sorted out. But I was a new pilot, and so I didn't understand what a deficit perhaps they were as controllers either. But I got rerouted and pushed all around and all this kind of wacky stuff, and to the point where it really reminded me of the this one incident that happened at Houston Hobby with a Cirrus pilot that had just been kind of routed through the work so many times, and then she ended up having the worst day of her life. So I had a really bad day and filmed all of it. And I was just documenting what was going on, but I basically said I just requested to leave the pattern and get me out of here, kind of thing. They had me doing a lot of stuff that I thought was kind of dangerous, really. And then I found out from my flight school later that the tower had come over to the flight school and like, who is this guy? And they were not happy about. I didn't like do a face forward video and be like, this is why air traffic control sucks, or like I was just documenting like this is the kind of thing that can happen, and it was novel to me because I was a new pilot. But they came over and they were not happy. And then my flight school people watched the video and they said he did everything he was supposed to do. He did the right thing. So I don't know what you're, sorry, but it made me. That was the point where I realized a lot of these guys and women, they tower controllers, they can't defend themselves. Sort of, you're getting captured in these contexts and things, and then perhaps portrayed by people like us in a particular way. I did it truthfully, but I can see how even if it is truthful, if it just doesn't look good, that can be problematic. Have you guys had not maybe personally, but just witnessed that kind of thing going on?
AG.
Not so much. Cool. Yeah. Good.
I mean, I think I can maybe say in general, if you're running into that, and it's like AG said at the beginning, it may be late in the shift. They may have had 5 pilots prior to you that were not doing anything they needed to do, and could have been heavy on training and heavy on approaches and a lot of non-compliance, inadvertent non-compliance. And they're frustrated.
Yeah.
And they want to get up, they want to walk out, they want to go on, and they can't until someone gets in there and relieves them. So we're human. We're human. And, you know, you're right. You're getting a tiny little snapshot.
Yep.
Your 10-minute interaction is a big deal. That was your 10 minutes in that airspace. And for that controller, that was 10 minutes of hours on position that day in a bad day. And it maybe doesn't represent that facility. So I can see why they may take issue with it, but hopefully you both learn from it, both sides.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just to kind of touch on that a little bit more, there are degrees of controllers. There are really good controllers. There are some that are not as good. And I will say that I've seen that sometimes the controllers that aren't as confident, that maybe not as good, when they start to get busy, that is their default, mode. Like, I'm going to kind of get angry and pretend like it's everyone else's fault, and so, and it's on the pilot side, it's almost impossible to know if that's what's happening, but stick that in the back of your brain, like maybe that is the scenario that's going on. It's not uncommon.
So with the other thing too, real quick, was just that the tower still doesn't have radar. So how does that work? I mean, they're with binoculars. I heard that they had ForeFlight in there for a minute, but they were required to take it out, I guess because it's obviously not sanctioned or something. But like, how does that work for these kind of Class Delta airports that really are relying on position reports and a prayer? Seems like half the time I'll be on midfield downwind, and half the time they don't know where I am or can't see me.
Yeah, I've never worked in a tower without a we call it a debright, a tower display of really a replica of what's being displayed downstairs in the radar room. But a lot of it relies on local knowledge, them knowing where the reporting points are, those VFR reporting points, and they're kind of juggling and making a mental picture and waiting until you get within range to actually see you with their eyeballs or binoculars. It's a different type of controller, different skill set, totally different skill set. I would struggle in that environment. I rely heavily on the radar.
It is really hard to see aircraft out the window sometimes. I mean, you guys know how it is when you're flying and they're like, hey, a mile and a half, traffic's a mile and a half. And you're like, I have no idea where this guy is.
Got him on the fish finder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you guys do it? How do you guys stand it? I don't know. All the stuff you hear. I don't know how.
I got about ForeFlight.
How do you have enough professionalism to not jab people that say things like that?
We just do it off frequency.
I'm sure that happens.
So instead of keying up and say it, we just say, okay, maintain ForeFlight separation then.
Exactly. The Badger pilot would like to know, have you noticed that over time your iceberg has gotten bigger and you can hold more penguins?
For me, not with age. No, it's the opposite. My iceberg has melted considerably.
It's warming in your head.
My penguins are all relatively new penguins. Some of it is ingrained, and I won't forget it. But for those of you who don't know, AG has made an awesome penguin analogy with icebergs. The iceberg being his brain, and penguins representing knowledge. There's a finite amount of space on this iceberg for penguins. And occasionally they have to find employment elsewhere.
That's good. David Moscardelli says, if a pilot makes a mistake, does an apology mean anything to the controller? I busted a Class Delta space after takeoff. I apologized.
Unfortunately, in terms of the legality of it, our hands are pretty tied when it comes to that stuff. I mean, we got somebody, watching over our shoulder saying, well, did you report that? Did you let the supervisor know? And I'm in just as much trouble for like trying to sweep it under the rug as you are for going into a Delta. It definitely doesn't hurt. It definitely doesn't hurt. The last thing you want combative is do the opposite thing. But saying you're sorry can go a long ways to diffusing. If the controller is upset, it can go a long ways to diffusing that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea.
I agree. I think it shows awareness that there was a possible mistake made, and it may end right there.
Yeah.
The-
It's a human element too, right? We're all humans, and yeah. Stephen Caldwell asks, he's a relatively low hour student pilot here at Lewisburg, West Virginia, which is Class D. Have low experience requesting clearance and flight following. Can I/how do I request that information prior to takeoff in a Class Delta? And I love this question because the answer is it depends. I have found complete inconsistency at Class Delta airports about how to do this. It just totally depends on the airport. What do you guys say? What's the answer?
It wasn't until recently that we sort of discovered that through feedback that it was two different choices. There were some Class Delta controllers that had the ability to type in a flight plan in the NAS, which is really what you're doing if you initiate it on the ground. They're starting that information that we told you how to give in the air. They're doing that on the ground and having you depart on a squawk code. Some facilities don't have that agreement with the underlying deltas, and you have to get that from the approach controller. So for a Charlie, I hate using the word always, but in a Charlie, you should always be able to get in the tower. That should be standard. At a Delta, it may be 50-50 in the NAS. And we've heard from a lot of controllers that, hey, we can't do it. We don't have the ability to put you in the NAS. You're going to have to depart on a 1200 code and ask for it from approach.
That's what we have to do. Yeah.
Interesting. Let's keep rolling with some of these. We got a lot in the queue here. Tim W says, I got a number to call a few weeks ago. That makes me see. I'm uncomfortable just reading.
We
that.
need the crowd noise.
It was Tower wanting to know if they were clear and if they could have said something better. Well, that's an interesting. That's a nice phone. I mean, that's about the best way that could have ended, I would think.
I hope.
Can you put that
when
question? Can you
they
put that
said
question back up?
Yeah.
I was Tower wanting to know.
If he means if they were clear with something they said, not like cleared for something, like if they were clear with their instruction was clear, or if they could have said something better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I hope they said when they said, hey, could you give us a call? It's nothing bad. We just want to talk about something. Because if it was me flying, I would be dreading the whole rest of the flight. It's totally in your brain. You're mentaled out. And so I hope the controllers weren't like, we have a number, for you to copy.
Right.
It's the relationship we need to talk equivalent.
Right.
Chris, and up in the chat, I saw it. I think his question's a little more complicated. He was asking if they were clear with instructions for a circle to land, which in a training environment, we train in the tower all the time. Of course, most of our trainees are in the radar room now, but that phraseology can be messed up really easily. And maybe they wanted to make sure that what they said, it made sense to the controller, the way we, told you circle left, northeast of the airport, enter right base for runway X. That makes sense to controllers because we say it all the time, but maybe they were trying to clarify, does it make sense to the pilot who's receiving this convoluted left turn, right base, circling direction? It's kind of funny phraseology, and it can be messed up really easily. So I think that's good that they called.
Sidebar, because we mentioned ADSB a little bit ago and kind of mocking the got them on ForeFlight and the kind of thing. What is your take? So one of the things that's kind of frustrating for me, and we see it, so I'm at an untowered field here, which is still shocking to me in 2022 that we still don't even require radios in these aircraft that fly in and out of these fields, let alone ADSB out. I was also fortunate to train in the time with an instructor who encouraged me, and I was going to have it anyway, but use an EFB from my first lesson, because I was adamant about, just for the safety factor of ADSB traffic, I just wanted one more tool. In terms of just safety of the airspace system in general, do you guys have any opinion? This is not like your job opinions, but as people opinions on how is it? I would like to see. I think radios frankly, and ADSB should be required in 100% of the national airspace system in every aircraft that's operating, regardless of what it is. Do you have any opinions? What is ADS? I guess the bigger overarching question is, from a controller standpoint, like, how has ADSB impacted your? Just had to be somewhat significant, I would think, impacted kind of your roles as controllers.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's delicate because telling a fleet of airplanes, because we're good in aviation and keeping things in the air for 100 years, right?
Right.
So adding these pieces of equipment has a cost to it, and there's implications to implying that everybody should have it. So the rules are set up where they don't have to have it everywhere, but in RH's perfect world, I will say everybody has radios in ADSB, but it was given to them. It made itself onto their airplane, and they didn't have to incur some ridiculous cost for an airplane that may not be worth putting that type of stuff in. That's my 2 cents to try to delicately get through that one.
That's fair.
It has made a huge impact. It has the ability just to be able to go and look signs. Just that ability alone has been a huge help to us. The increased coverage of being able to see folks on radar, places we couldn't see you before, places where we had to increase separation because you were so antenna, and you were like an occasional return. Sometimes we didn't get you, sometimes we did. So in that like technical aspect of it, I think it's been a huge help. As far as radios go, we get in trouble for saying this all the time with other controllers, but we wish we were talking to everybody. I would much rather be talking to two people, two VFRs, that are coming together, and be able to tell both of them, like, hey, you go down 500 and you go up. But when the other guy is just you don't know what he's doing, it's inevitable that as soon as you give an instruction to the one you are talking to, the other one turns the other way. And now you're constantly fighting. I don't know what this guy is doing. Other controllers are like, we do not want to talk to everyone. No.
I like Josh's question down here.
What is it?
Are there significant regional differences in controllers like he has heard? Pennsylvania, New York, Massachusetts, and it seems like there's different norms between them.
Yeah, I mean, you've been all over the place in the King Air.
Yeah. I haven't flown a lot in the Northeast. I've flown up there some. I don't know what the word is. It's maybe a little more high strung in the Northeast, but I think that's just because of how crowded it is and the finite amount of airspace they have. It's sort of that scenario has just lended itself to that, I guess, mentality in air traffic. And it gets that way more when you go to Florida and you're like, everybody's funneled into this one spot, and it gets a little bit crazier there. But I feel like the farther west you go, like in the middle of the country, I feel like it's super laid back. I've flown all over the place in the middle of the country, and it is pretty laid back.
My experience is
including
the
bigger
same.
places like Kansas City. Yeah, Kansas City Center. I spent a couple months flying out there, and they were always helpful. They're super nice. I mean, it was always laid back, and you never had to worry about, because I was sort of in a student role at that time, and you never really had to worry about getting stepped on or crunched on frequently, anything like that.
We got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to throw out there one more time. If you're in the chat with us tonight, if you're catching this later, if you want to join us live, we record every other Wednesday nights at 8. But if you're with us tonight, get those questions in the chat now, because we're quickly running out of time. Tim Lean says, are there some casual radio phrases you wish pilots would stop using? Here, it's got to be another one that you've heard 100 times. What are they? What do we do that really makes you go like, oh my God, you guys are idiots?
It doesn't bother me. Maybe we've said it kind of in a different tone on the show, depending on what was introduced to us. Like, hey, what do you think of this? But they don't bother us. Sometimes just, yeah. I can't think of any ones that are specific. We've had fun lately with you.
Yeah.
That's
With
been
you,
fun.
yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
with you, that type of thing. But and we actually spent a little bit of time trying to help people fill in that desire to feel that weird awkwardness of, all right, I just checked in, I just walked into their place, told them who I was. I have to say something else. I can't just say my name. So
Yeah.
What about the 2 and the 4 and all that? I feel like I'm always trying to extract that, and it's hard to do that, but it seems like it could pose confusion.
2 and the 4.
oh, you mean
I'm whatever left downwind for runway 4. For runway whatever.
avoiding the words 2 and 4 for TWO and FOUR? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that I don't feel like that happens enough, at least for me. I don't hear it enough where it presents itself as a challenge for me to interpret it. I think in a non-towered environment, when you're talking to other controllers, that's probably when you're going to hear the strangest things from other pilots, because they're not talking to ATC, they're talking to another pilot, and you've heard all sorts of ways to announce themselves and their turns and their positions in the pattern, and a lot of it's just made up phraseology. So you should probably try to avoid that in those places to make sure everybody understands where you're at. But it doesn't bother me enough to even remember something like that, a 2 or a 4.
I think for me, it's also because where I train, it's where I trained and where I fly out of, it's runway 2 and runway 20 at John Toon Airport that people call Toon. So it's like Toon Airport, two, 20. I'm texting to 20 Toon. Like it's all this like I say 02 and 20 for the runways, and people think that I'm just a nerd. So
Somebody called me out on one of my videos. I never caught myself doing this, but I had a bad habit. And when I'm like, if tower clears me, like if I'm doing pattern work and they clear me to land, I would say, cleared to land runway 21 for 452 Lima. The last 3 digits of my call sign. Like that instruction was for me. And someone said, that's a little confusing. It doesn't matter like our airport when I'm like the only person in the like it's not, they know who I am, but like I could see if you're in a busier space and you start like adding extra numbers and they're like, wait, who is that calling 452? Like could get a little confusing. So I'm trying to be more conscious of not saying like 4 and then my call sign, but that was kind of interesting.
Ben brought up a good point. Say no to kilo. When we're typing in a flight following request, that we can't put the K in. And so if you started typing and the pilot says we're going to Kilo Bravo Uniform Yankee, I'm like Kilo Bravo Uniform.
Uh-oh.
And then I got a backspace.
Yeah.
And type
Somebody said something on the show recently.
No.
Somebody presented us with information that there's been a software update that may allow us to do 4 letters, and that K may be taken.
Oh my God.
And I said I would try it, and I haven't done it. I can't do it. In fact, I've taken the key.
Into that. No.
I've taken the kilo key out of my keyboard, and I only put it back in. I only put it back in if it's in the aircraft call sign.
That's good. Brian Weather says, as the only pilot/controller in my facility, it seems like I've become the unofficial read designated pilot grievance taker. RH&AG, do you find yourself in the same spot?
We have quite a few other pilot. Well, we just lost one. He moved down south, but we do have a few. I don't know, not really. I mean, ask us questions sometimes, like they always. Not too much. I end up preaching more than anything, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard to watch some of the things that are, if you take the bottom 5% of performance in the pilot side, it's hard not to, unkey and say, what are they doing? You're making it look bad for every other pilot out there. So I know they might come to us with questions, but I don't think they're using us as the sounding board to complain about pilots, because it's not like we represent every pilot in the ass.
Right. Well, guys,
and they don't need excuses. Some controllers don't need excuses to complain.
It's too bad you can't have an SOB list. There was this, when I lived in New York City, there was this Chinese taco place of all things, and they had this giant wall they didn't speak any English, but they had a big sign that said SOB list, and it was just all the people that had wronged them, for ordering things and not
Oh,
following through or whatever. It was. I kind of picture you guys having SOB lists, at least mentally, right?
I don't. I try not to remember if somebody upset me for some reason. I try to push it out of my head because the likelihood of that pilot being the one who flies it in the next time is probably pretty low, especially with flight schools. So.
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome.
We do get to know though.
I'm sure.
We get to know the call signs, and you sort of know who's willing to do what, who kind of the call signs of student pilots, the call signs of who can I slam dunk in front of somebody. You start to learn what you can get away with, and then they might get accustomed to that. Those guys, and then you get a trainee that doesn't know anything about anything, and so sometimes if there's huge variation in the services that you're receiving, it can easily be something like that.
Yeah. Clarksburg knows our 3 airplanes call signs, and my favorite moment, I cracked myself up. They were calling out traffic. One of our other planes was coming into the pattern. I was already in, and they called them out to me. They were on final, and I was on downwind. They said, it's airplane. I said, yep, 52 Lima. We got the company Cessna in sight, and they thought that was pretty funny. But I thought it was funny. Well, awesome. I really appreciate you guys taking time to join us tonight. Take just a minute, will you? And remind everybody again where they can find your podcast, how they can support what you guys are doing. I know I'm a patron. I have been for a while, and you guys have a Patreon working over there too. It's pretty cool. And just plug yourself for a minute.
And thank you, Chris, for supporting the show and having us on here. Get a chance to talk to some of your listeners. You can find us on all major podcast players. Search on any of them. We're available on those. If you want to go to our website, opposingbases.com. And if you're interested in supporting the show, patreon.com/opposingbases. We do have a YouTube channel. You can search for Opposing Bases on YouTube. We don't put a ton on there. Our live stream recording is for patrons every week, but it's an unlisted link. So occasionally we'll put a video on there. And I think coming up, we're going to AirVenture in the second half of the week. We're going up on Thursday. We're flying up a Skyhawk from the Flying Club. And if you guys want to meet us, we'll be there Thursday late and Friday, Saturday before we head home on Sunday.
Awesome. Well, it's been a good time. Thank you to everyone for tuning in on the live stream. Had a great crowd tonight. Lots of great interaction. And Brian, we'll see you next week, sir.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. It's been a blast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.